Thank you so much, Cheryl. Thank you all for joining who's on the call so far. Yeah, so we've been running the center for a few months now and having different guests speak on a variety of topics. And so it's really great to have you here, Dr. Lourdes. We're excited to hear. I was reading your bio and you've got such an extensive amount of experience. And we've really the talks we've been having have been more focused on kind of food and agriculture. So it's great to have you and hear more kind of about the context of community health and outreach. And, the overarching aim of this center is really to bridge the community with the universities and to get more action going in the fields of food justice and health equity. So I have interview questions that I think you've seen, and you're happy just to talk and tell us about your work and share. And if not, then I can go through the questions.
Sure. So I had prepared a little presentation kind of based on your questions.
Okay, great.
I don't know if you want me to show those slides or we could do it whichever way you'd like, Dr. Waterman. And thank you, Cheryl. And thanks everybody for being here this morning.
Great.
We can show the slides, Dr. Lourdes. You want to send them to me, or you want me to?
If you allow me to share, I could just share them.
Okay, yes.
And then I can send them to you later.
Okay, great, because we're going to post them on the website.
Okay.
What a treat. Okay, I'm going on mute now.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, can you see that? Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, okay. Okay, now it's asking me to admit people. I'm going to ignore that one, right? You guys will admit them, or do I need to admit them? All right. Okay, so I wanted to thank Cheryl. Cheryl and I, we go way back with many different adventures that we've been engaged in, and I just wanted to thank her especially for inviting me. And to Dr. Waterman, I've been following the work that you've been doing, but I was also last night looking at your website, and it really is impressive how you guys have gotten all this together as quickly as you have, and with a real global approach. So today I want to talk about some of the community innovative things that we're doing. One of our projects that just recently got funded as well, and to tell you how we've been engaging communities in participatory research in very innovative ways, and the ways that we're reaching out to our communities, just using non-traditional ways and approaches, both locally, nationally, and internationally. So one of the things that I am excited to tell you about is that we just recently got funded for a Southern California research center on chronic disease in Latino families. And the whole center is really based on chronic diseases that are produced by, food insecurity or obesity as well. And we have a very large team that's going to be working. This is under the direction of Dr. Michael Gorin from CHLA, as well as myself at USC, and a very large team of individuals, which range anywhere from researchers to several folks who are bringing in with pilot projects. And this is the scope of the center. So it's really very large. It goes all the way from San Luis Obispo to the southern tip of California. And also in some aspects, especially with our folks at San Diego State University, will also expand further. And so these are the different groups that we're working with. And we have a community core to link all of these different academic institutions with communities. And so you can imagine the challenges that that brings to us, because not always do we have the same agendas, right? But that's what our community core will try to navigate. So this presentation, and particularly, I'm going to talk about how we build on strengths and assets of the community. And then I'm going to give you sample programs. The sample programs I'm going to give you are not all nutrition or necessarily, they're on a different variety of things, but just to give you a general scope of what we've been doing and how we've been approaching this. So one of the things that we have been focusing on certainly is that the Hispanic Latino population, about 78% is overweight or obese. Especially we're seeing major problems among our young kids and our youth. And so we really feel that there's a need to invest a lot of attention in this, hence this new center. We really have a very large immigrant population with many different groups. So the heterogeneity is huge, which creates new challenges for us in terms of how we address the issues in these populations. For our center, we're looking not just at the nutrition and biology, behavioral and the environment, but also those social determinants of health that really make a difference. And looking in particular at really early life determinants that could make a difference in childhood obesity. And so through different cores and different research projects, this is part of what the center is going to be focusing on. And then really with a lot of attention at seeing how we could reduce disparities in obesity, in type 2 diabetes, in fatty liver disease, and in dyslipidemia across the entire life course. So it's a huge challenge, but we're very excited about what we could potentially achieve.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
Sorry.
please.
Could you just give a couple examples of some of the other social determinants that are kind of outside of, I mean, is that more economic as well, or what?
Yes, so definitely, you know, the availability of foods, the access to foods, you know, the many cultural things that we tend to do around food that sometimes are healthy and sometimes not as healthy. You know, all of those come, you know, to a head in this kind of research. And part of it also has to do with the fact that, you know, there are areas that not only are food deserts, but also have an overabundance of different kinds of, you know, fast foods and things like that. So the choices, you know, especially in these times when people have such food insecurity, the choices are almost made for you. It's not like you really even have a choice. And so we're looking at that. We're also looking at upstream types of determinants, which are more of a policy oriented things that we could change and potentially provide the data to make a difference in.
Thank you.
Yeah. So in all the work that we do, we really engage our community partners from the very beginning stages. And so it's very participatory in nature, and they are part of what we do in a real mutual learning, where it's not that we in the academy have all the answers at all. And it's, you know, and so we really rely on their community wisdom to really help us shape a lot of the things that we're doing. We also make sure that people are sharing equally in terms of power and compensation, which is oftentimes something that people tend to say, oh, well, they're going to benefit from this. No, we need to compensate the communities as well in whatever ways that we can for the work that they're doing. Okay, I'm still admitting people here. All right, so some of the strategies we've used, we really use transdisciplinary approaches. So when I refer to transdisciplinarity, what I'm talking about, it's not just the multiple disciplines coming together like in a beautiful puzzle where you all of a sudden have this gorgeous picture. No, we want to create a chemical reaction, a boom, such that, you know, it's like something that would have never been done before, that it will be mind-boggling, and that together with our communities, we're working on something that's new, exciting, and that we hadn't even thought about. And so it's a fusion. It's a chemical reaction, what we want to produce. not just bringing together multiple disciplines, but really bringing them to fuse, to create, and to really generate new energy that's going to make changes at the community level. Okay, so this is how we're doing a lot of the work in the community. We certainly have academic partners and community partners that are building and sustaining relationships. We work very closely with our community advisory boards, but in addition to that, we also have additional cultural experts that often join our communities. We really work on building that community trust, negotiating the common vision. It is not my vision, it's not just your vision. How do we come up with this common vision? And then building competence, both at the community in terms of research skills and at the academy in terms of increasing outreach, engagement, and capacity. And so we have multiple programs, including right now, we're working through one of our projects on a citizen scientist program that's going to train community residents to be true scientists for the community. And so that will be something that will be airing in the spring. And I think Dr. Aristizabal and Mr. Ibarra are on the call today, and they have been instrumental in helping to move that forward. Our approach is really based on cultural values, really looking at cultural norms, that always creating that sense of reciprocity and belonging, and really working with our communities and so that their cultural capital is really what is the primary thing in everything that we do. It's not a deficit model, it's an asset model. And so where are the strengths in the community that we could build further and strengthen further to achieve our goals? So we engage our communities from the grassroots level, really listening to the community, whether it's through focus groups, town hall meetings, advisory board meetings, and a variety of other ways. And we also have a large cadre of promotores de salud that work with us in multiple different projects that really make the difference. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about where some of our initiatives also intersect with the whole food justice area. So for example, when COVID hit, the Keck School of Medicine, along with Keck Medicine and University Relations, realized that there was a lot of need in the community. And so we, without really having, done this before, we brought all of our resources together and worked with the YMCA and ended up servicing 1,300 families per week during the entire pandemic in the last 2 years, and really provided over 2 million pounds of food that were distributed, and expanded our areas from immediately surrounding our Los Angeles HSC campus to 22 neighborhoods around the area where food was given at many different locations, as well as at the YMCA. And either people could drive up in their cars to pick it up for their families, or we would distribute it, and sometimes we had very long lines to get this done. But our effort didn't stop there. We really understood that our seniors, talk about food justice issues, our seniors were homebound. They were in the middle of this pandemic and they had little food. So Mr. Ibarra, who I was mentioning, was one of those in the team that went door to door to do wellness check on our seniors in low income areas, and to make sure that they brought food to them so that they could make sure that they had something to eat, and also check up on them. And okay, so I want to say, we love our pets. So we also had a cat and dog food distribution so that we could make sure that, the little pets in our lives could also be taken care of. Also, Jesemi Lopez and Priscilla Marin, who are also, I think, on the call, they developed this Adelante program, which they've been working on for years. And they made it all online in order to help people stay physically healthy. And so it was this pivoting and creative type of way of like, how do we make things continue to happen for people? We also did outreach to farm workers because we understood that our food supply could potentially be compromised. And so we couldn't, and for us, all of this is part of food justice as well. And so we realized that they didn't have masks. And so we gave them masks and also provided with information in order to secure our food supply could also continue. We also have really worked in terms of narrative, and our whole effort has been to use edutainment. Edutainment is entertainment, education merged together in order to create, films and educational videos that really make a difference. So this is a family spirit, which is all about a family who has been fighting diabetes. And we produce this with the USC School of Cinematic Arts. And this one is also another one of the films we produce, and also with the School of Cinematic Arts. And this one is with an Ethiopian family about eating healthy, and how traditionally in many of the countries people immigrate into the US, they eat very healthy. And although they don't call it exercise, they're out gardening, they're out actually, working the crops. And so there is that kind of exercise that happens. All gets lost here when we face McDonald's. It's just really difficult at that level. And here we see talking about eating natural foods. And if I could just show you a few seconds of this, let's see if it'll go there. But you could also find it on YouTube. And let's see if it'll start. Yeah. Can you hear it?
No.
No.
You can't hear it? Okay.
And are we able to get the link and then you could do it?
Yes.
Because we still have a few minutes, Dr. Lourdes, we can,
Okay.
Lourdes,
we
you
can
just
see
have
the
to,
video.
I think if you want to play it, all you would have to do is stop your share and enable sound. I don't think you have your sound enabled.
Yeah, I did enable it. Tell you what, I'm gonna skip the video and I'm gonna tell you guys to go see it. And it's at USC IHI Films. And we have 3 videos there that you could look at. But it just shows you a feeling of, how our families here in Los Angeles are trying their best to plant things that are traditional, that are within their culture, and to do that. And so what we've done is that to support that with the help from the Keck Medicine, we've produced these community gardens that are helping families and schools really support that effort of planting more culturally oriented crops and foods that will be sustaining and that will give pleasures of being home. And Cheryl, we'll send you everything.
Okay, great. I was just sitting here trying to Google it so I could put it in the chat for anyone. Okay, cool. Got it.
So,
thank you.
Sure. So here's another one. I think this one will play. This is another film. This is not necessarily on food, but it is a cervical cancer film that we did, Tamale Lesson with the Annenberg School of Communication.
Have you
Dr.
ever
Sheila
had that
Murphy.
test?
No, I told you I'm a virgin.
Okay, it's true. You mainly get HPV from sex.
Right. So what? You're 21 and you should get yourself checked out.
Checked out for what? A pap test?
What's a pap test?
Nothing.
Hey, I got nothings too. I'm about to be a woman.
You're about to be 15. Not quite a woman.
Petra got married when she was 15.
And I was too young. Why are you going to have a pap test?
So it's all around
That's
food.
what they're talking about while they're making tamales. Can you believe this? Well, every woman should know about pap tests.
Why are you promoting your sister? She doesn't need to know about those things.
Yes, she does.
Do you want her to get cancer?
Who's talking about cancer?
You can get cancer down there.
Yes, but Connie, not like you. She's a virgin.
Pap tests are not just for women who have sex.
Ay,
Do you know women from 21 to 60, they should get checked at least every 2 years. And if you're sexually active, you should get checked more often. 50% of the women have this virus.
That many?
Yes, and if you don't get checked, you can get cervical cancer and it can spread all over your body and you could die. You should get yourself checked, Petra.
my husband is dead. Why would I need a Baptist?
Who has the time?
Or the money?
It's not that expensive. It's an easy checkup. Plus, I hear women your age.
I ain't that old.
I'm just saying, you're on the higher risk. Plus, it's very easy. You don't even have to go to a hospital. You can go to the clinic on Central, and it's free.
Does it hurt?
No, not really. Just like a mosquito bite like this.
Ow. It's
Ow.
embarrassing. And it's probably uncomfortable.
No, it's more like this. Okay, when you go to the doctor, you sit on the table, and they spread your legs like this.
Stop. And what exactly does the doctor do?
Okay, so let's pretend this is your vagina.
It's not that color.
Petra, just pretend.
Okay, I'm a tamal.
So the doctor has like this device, this metal device. They just spread the walls of your vagina.
I don't say words like that.
Petra, you never had this test done before? It's not as bad as it looks. Yeah. They take this mascara type 1 and then they just lob you on the inside like what?
Take a little sample of your cells.
You still have to.
I'm going to stop it there, but you get the gist of how food is so much part of all of our cultures. And so that also became part of this video, which is about cervical cancer, but it's really, a lot about, getting together as a family and kind of the traditions and how we could talk about all health issues related to a variety of things. What's really more surprising for us is that we did in a controlled trial where we had a fact-based film and we had this film in a narrative way rather than just all the facts. And what we saw was that at baseline, the dark blue were the disparities we had in terms of cervical cancer screening. And within 6 months, we had corrected the disparity among 1,000 women. And so that to us is very powerful. And this was all the power of storytelling and narrative. And of course, it was well done. You just can't run and just make little videos and assume you're going to create this level of change, because they have to have 3 essential things. There has to be some kind of emotion, which we do generate, whether that's positive or negative. There has to be also transportation, and that means that people are transported into the film. And there has to be an identification of characters with the characters so that you as an individual can identify in one way or another or know of someone that is like that. And so that's really what makes a difference in terms of achieving the behavioral change. And this is the results of that. We've also used other strategies. For example, our Estiempo campaign uses environmental cues. It's the blooming of the purple jacaranda tree that blooms in Los Angeles between April and June. And so when this jacaranda tree blooms, we're getting out messages about HPV vaccinations. And so after 4 years, we saw a change in terms of the number of vaccines that were given in the Boyle Heights area, and also an increase in screening compared to areas immediately surrounding it that did not have the campaign. And so this is kind of what our campaign looks like in terms of some of the billboards. And what you see is a real difference between the control group and the intervention group, where you see a very large difference in terms of the percent of women who also, in addition to seeing the whole campaign, also receive follow-up materials at home with the images and with everything happening simultaneously in the neighborhood, and really creating this amazing buzz and change. We've worked the same way with 2 films. If you go to Vaccinate LA, this is all based on the COVID now. And what I want to tell you about our films that's really important is that they are also done with filmmakers that are from those communities. And so you have here the filmmakers who worked on the Spanish language film of Reasons and Rumors to demystify all of the misinformation that there was at the community level. And then this is our African-American crew that worked on the film. And many of these are our own students that have been engaged in this. I'm going to try to see if I could play you just 1 minute of this trailer. Can you hear that?
You don't just like say hush up because for the white man. If everybody got the vaccine, why do I have to get it too? Okay?
If anything, we should want to be vaccinated to protect Granny.
Melanie, don't worry. I'm bringing her down to the clinic tomorrow.
You can't take her to get something that she doesn't even understand.
I'm best.
You know what? I can just talk to Granny myself.
Oh,
Do you really think I would have everyone at my house and not be vaccinated? Should I was first in line?
So you can see how, we're working with the community. The community is really part of every effort that we're doing in there. And one of the interesting things is that we saw a 30% increase in vaccinations than were expected in those zip codes where the films were utilized, along with other things. We've also been producing a fotonovela with Mel Barron from the School of Pharmacy. This one is also on vaccinations, and it's more catering towards individuals who are older in the Hispanic community. We also have a community vaccine navigators program, which has just been amazing. We have trained people going door to door. And I have to tell you, I'm really proud to tell you that we've trained nationwide 430 community vaccine navigators now. And one of the most fantastic things is that they've been able to get shots in arms among 400,000 people. And that's our communities on their own doing this work with the training that they've received. And so it's just amazing. And this is happening, folks, in 34 cities throughout the United States. It's not just LA. It's going everywhere. And we're so excited and just supportive of the work they're doing. But we have to tell you, our promotores are telling us there's still large food insecurities in our community. Many of the food distribution centers have closed and people are still hungry. So we have a lot of work still ahead to do. We've been doing vaccines and food. So we bring food to the community, but we bring vaccines to the community as well. And we've worked with our local artists, trying to find ways, creative ways to deliver messaging in the community. Like this, our billboards that are still up in our communities. We've worked with children and youth, our Boys and Girls Club, to develop these messaging. These are the kids themselves that have been working on this messaging. And one very, very last effort to close now is to tell you about the work that we've done in Panama, in particular with work with the Emberá tribes in the indigenous communities in Panama. We've worked with schools, and we've developed a nutritional program and an exercise curriculum that it was initiated at the school, a community school, 24 de Diciembre. And Rosa Barahona has been instrumental in helping me implement that. And we have now that curriculum, which was developed by our students in our MPH program, has been adapted by 16 other schools throughout Panama. And we've been working as well in the Emberá community and other indigenous communities, trying to understand what are some of the assets, what are some of the benefits of that these communities can bring to inform the more westernized parts of society. So that's what I wanted to tell you a little bit about. I'm going to stop sharing and open it up for any questions or discussion.
Woo! Talk about the hot sauce. That's right, Dr. Lourdes.
Thank you,
You
Sharon.
guys see why I think she's so amazing? Questions, Dr. Carey, please lead us off. I saw someone put something in the chat, Dr. Lourdes. One person wanted to know, how are you getting information to communities that may not have access to tech and that lack internet or digital literacy skills?
Yes. Oh my God. Thank you for that question, because then it gives me an opportunity to tell you some of the things. Our door-to-door type of event with the community navigators and some of the work where we do our wellness checks with our seniors have been instrumental to provide that kind of education. And so it's been one-on-one, but it's been a massive one-on-one. We, have really been able to get the support from community health workers that have been instrumental in getting the messaging out. I have to tell you, and Rosa Barron is here, we at one point when the vaccinations were available, but not really that available in our communities, what happened was that we actually had people go door to door, telephone them on the phone to get the vaccine appointments because they couldn't really access I have a PhD and I had a hard time getting myself, on an appointment. Imagine, when you don't speak the language and you don't have the capacity to deal with this internet, or the internet itself is unstable and your thing drops. Really, it's a lot of the challenges. So we, through the vaccine navigation program, we alleviated all of that. And we literally had to go door to door to pick people up and take them in small buses to the vaccination site. And so sometimes it's that neighbor to neighbor. A lot of the neighbors really pitched in with this. I want to mention Juana Mora, who was amazing in her own neighborhood, and she would alert us. There's this group of seniors here that have not heard about us. They don't know. And so that's why being really in contact with the community on a regular basis, it's not just like a work, it's part of our lives, and our entire outreach team is who they are and what they do. And they live in the neighborhood. They live right there, so they could see it. They know what's happening around them. So in that sense, the education has not just been on social media or using technology. We certainly have used all of that, but has also been one-on-one, trying to help people to navigate the kinds of things that need to be navigated to get to where they want to go.
If anyone else does, I can let other people go first, I think.
Well, I heard Queen Mother Nina had her hand up.
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. Hello, Dr. Lourdes. Great work that you are doing. My name is Queen Mother Nina Womack. I run an organization, a holistic organization here in Los Angeles called Let's Be Whole. And a big portion of Let's Be Whole is not only holistic wellness education, but food security. So I've been operating a mobile food pantry throughout South Los Angeles and San Pedro for about 3 years now. So I'm very, very passionate about food security. I'm also the chairwoman of the California chapter of a national organization. My local chapter is the California Women in Agriculture Association, and our parent company is the National Women in Agriculture Association, which is about 2,500 female farmers across the US. In addition, I just opened up our chapter in Africa. I just spent the last 7 weeks in Nigeria and Ghana. And so I would like to see how we could, maybe join forces or partner together. And also I'm interested in this indigenous program with bringing that to Africa. I have touched base with a lot of farm organizations, youth farm organizations in Ghana and Nigeria, and I am steadily working with that community to do import and export between our crops here in California, as well as Nigeria and Ghana. So that's what I'd like to see how we can work together.
Oh, Queen Mother Nina, thank you so much for those words and for the incredible work that you're doing all over the world. And definitely I will follow up with Cheryl to get your information. Cheryl, is that something I could do with you? Okay, so that we
Yes.
can connect. I want to tell you something that, one of the things that we did in Panama was that the curriculum that was being used for nutrition was not really culturally very specific. And so that's one thing that, being able to have people grow the foods that they are comfortable and familiar with and that they know, and that they're able to really understand that, because they don't have to always be eating, like, well, that's actually the Western food may not be good for your health. So that's really important. And so I'm so glad to hear about the agricultural program. When we developed the curriculum in Panama, our students really had to go out into the community and understand how the people ate and what they ate, and when they ate, and if they ate. So those are very hard lessons sometimes for us who have such abundance here in the United States. But for some of our people, it's not just about eating healthy, it's about not having anything to eat. So,
and what you said, Dr. Lourdes, what I've been experiencing here locally in Los Angeles, the demographics that I serve, I would say is about 48% African American, maybe the same, maybe 52% Latino, and then I have maybe 1 to 2% white and Asian that we serve every week. So like you said about having culturally appropriate food, like I recover food from Whole Foods and Trader Joe's and different farm organizations. So say I might get a lot of jicama. Well, Black people are not used to jicama, so they don't want the jicama. And so it's very important that we offer culturally appropriate foods to those demographics.
Yes, and also food that are affordable. So one of the programs within our new center that's led by Dr. Deborah Cohen is working with individuals to buy food in a very low budget, but that still has all of the nutritional elements that are needed. And so through our Promotoras de Salud program is training individuals on how to purchase these foods. And right now, for about a year, we'll be purchasing the food for them, and then easing in, their own purchasing slowly, but purchases that they could even do with food stamps and other kinds of programs that are available. And so that they're still within a budget, because that's the other thing, when you go to some of our communities, what's more expensive, you could get, what is it, like 2 hamburgers for $1, but you can't get, good fruits and vegetables, even tomatoes for $1.
Which is why I give it out for free every week. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
I put the website link for the Center of Expertise in the chat, and we call them our academic mentors, because as you can see, Dr. Lourdes and others that have presented have so much content to guide our grassroots everyday activities. And that's what this project is all about. You can visit them and see them on the website under the bio page. And so their information is there, and given time and priorities, we're making these programs and individuals available to you. And we'll coach you through if you need help to really connect and we see the scalability of a project. But that's exactly why we're doing this, to help inspire and bring these resources to places, Nina. So we will definitely, Queen Nina, we will work with you and help to make that connection with you and your program locally.
Oh, great. Thank you, Cheryl.
You're
Looking
so
forward to it.
welcome. There's a lot, believe me, there's so much data. That's our whole vision, is to accelerate this whole adoption of best practices. And finally, academia has caught up with community input and feedback for years about how do we really co-design? How do we really sit down together, get those graduate students out of the halls and put them in community in various types of field and internships, and their professors become more like coaches and trusted guides as they get out there and innovate and implement. And so we're finally there to make these resources available. So every institution, starting with UC Davis, but USC is there, and Berkeley is there, and Sacramento, and everybody else. We're going to be bringing them all in. That's what our mission in this food justice space, to bring that to bear so we can have this transformational change and take it to the world. So I really treasure you all, and thank you. This is a labor of love for us. As hard work it is, Dr. Carey is a taskmaster. Can I get an amen on that for everyone that knows?
Amen.
Dr. Lourdes
Amen.
is too, right? So any other questions or comments? Dr. Lourdes is on a schedule, so I'm managing this with her and Rosa today. So is there anything else that anybody wanted to say or add?
To follow up with you and get into some of the details, but just the first slide with the map of California and all the institutions you were working with, that's really incredible. I mean, how many people and how does that happen? I'd love to kind of, have a conversation about that. I think, one of the challenges that we have is that networking, right? So you have things at this micro level of one person going to their neighbor's house, and that level, and then you also have this statewide agendas and policies, and so it's just really impressive to see the work at that micro and macro level, I think. And we're Cheryl and I have been talking a lot about working more in the populations with people with diabetes as well. And kind of the dream I have is somewhat of an agricultural or community intervention with urban farming, and then measuring outcomes on, blood sugar, really like that as and food security. So I think we could use a lot of your help and support in the different stages of that, and if others are interested. But yeah, I guess my question is, what else can we do for you as a little kind of startup pilot center and bringing people together? Or I guess that's my question. Or if you have any suggestions for us.
Yeah, so one thing is that the new center has a variety of pilot projects offering up to $50,000 for different kinds of projects. So if you could, you'll have to follow up with me so I can, this is brand new, so we don't have a website yet or anything. I mean, we just got the funding about maybe a month or so ago. So we're barely starting, but there will be, but we're already sending out applications for this, for the pilot. And so if people want to come in with a sort of community and academic type of partnership, that's certainly something that's very viable within that mechanism. And then, we have, through our Masters of Public Health program, our students have to do over 200 hours at the community level for their practicum. And many of them are trained. Some of them are even on this site today. And they're trained in this sort of effort and in how we do our work. A lot of our work is also in cancer prevention and control. So we have people like Elena Nieves who's here as well that help us with that. But we have been, certainly diabetes has hit our Latino community very, very hard. And we also see that it's hitting our young children with type 2 diabetes really hard. And so those are areas that we definitely need to make a difference. Dr. Gorin, who is the director of the center, he is looking at children under 5 years of age and even fatty liver disease.
Wow.
And other things, under 5. And so how can we change that trajectory early on? And it's through the foods that we eat, and your local programs about trying to help people learn to do agriculture, even in canisters. I mean, we know that in Cuba, they have this incredible program of doing planting just in canisters on rooftops.
Yeah.
And so there are many different ways that we can make sure that our communities are still eating healthy. And with everything so expensive, it may not be a bad idea.
Yeah, and that's when we kind of get into the idea of food sovereignty as well, right? Is that you can have access to growing those. So yeah, thank you so much. It was so impressive. The videos, the reach, the engagement with the community to develop the videos, and yeah, thank you for bringing students and supporters to this meeting as well. We're really, really grateful and inspiring talk. So.
Well, thank you guys for everything that you're doing. And Cheryl, you're just one little dynamite out there. So we appreciate you very much as well. And thank you, Dr. Waterman. It's a real pleasure meeting you finally. I mean, I think we've emailed, but finally getting to meet you. And thanks everybody for being here today. I know that, these times are very troubling for all of us. It just seems like we can't get over this pandemic, but stay strong and stay healthy and eat as nutritiously as you can to make all that happen. You guys take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Dr. Lourdes.
Bye-bye.
Wow, that was great. She's incredible and doing so much. There's a lot to take in.
Yes. Our second guest, I'm checking.
So what I was going to say is I think he's going to join at 9 o'clock. So we can chat, we can take a little break. It's up to, we just have a little gap in the scheduling. Dr. Gaidi Faraj is a professor, so he's got in the middle of a class right now, and then will join us at 9. So.
Well, that was really amazing. And I think this is just going to add to our, our catalog, of the different types of resources up and down the state. So just so amazing. So I'll check with everyone as soon as I get more information about the program, the video, and the slides. We can post them to the site.
Yeah, and that's great if they have these pilot grants. I mean, maybe we can apply as our.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Exactly. We qualify too. So that would be awesome to get that out. I included a few grants I found in our monthly newsletter. So if anybody wants to know more about that, I found a site that I could access with up-to-date grant information. So
yeah, thank you. That's great and helpful. It's always exciting to see some of those different opportunities. And I think overall, that's what we're working on too, is developing out the resources page. So, anyone who's involved in this can also submit more information in terms of grants and resources, people, if you want to recommend someone to be on the panel, and then also books, podcasts, audio, we're trying to really build out our library of resources. I was going to ask Cheryl, would it be possible to try and play the video that she was trying to play? Well, we have this little. time?
Let me see. I
Or
can
maybe
go
10.
there. Yeah, let me see. I do have it. I think it was this one. Hold on. Let me see if I can get the full screen, and then I will do that. One moment. Get the sound on.
Everyone, this is Queen Mother Nina. Duty calls me to go pick up food right now for the community, so I have to run, but I'm glad that I caught the first half, and I hope to see the video with the second professor speaking. So everyone have a blessed day. I have to go now.
Thank you, Queen Mother Nina. Thanks for joining and thanks for your work.
Thanks, Dr. Carey.
I want to hear about your trip too.
Yeah, I've got to share pictures. I've got to share. I went and toured some aquaculture farms, some fisheries, some farms in Nigeria, coconuts and palm trees, palm oil, all kind of stuff. And so they want to work with me. So maybe this is a program that I can bring to global food justice too.
That's great. That's great. Very exciting.
Yes. Okay, talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks.
I found the video, so I have it on the screen, and let me know if you can hear the sound. I'm going to start it now.
I have a 5-year-old, I have a 5-month-old, and I have 7 dogs, 4 cats, 2 butterflies, a home to take care of, and a salon to take care of. And myself. Wash your hands, please. My boyfriend's at work all day. I'm glad my mom's able to help me in the mornings. Samuel had just turned 4 years old when they told me that he was obese. I didn't see it because to me, he's not fat, he's a big boy. Even myself, I'm considered obese and I don't feel that I am obese. I feel like we're heavy boned.
Hi, candy mom.
Just one.
Okay.
And that's it, okay? I felt responsible. I felt like I wasn't doing my job as a mom. So I put him on a diet.
Why you make me so late, Mom?
Oh, I know, we're always so late. Come on, hurry, run. Give me kissy. Give me kissy. Give me kissy. Give me kissy. Sometimes I don't have time to cook. I don't have time to get something healthy. The markets, they don't have something that's prepared, that's healthy where we live. It's easier to get McDonald's, Burger King, Jack in the Box, drive through, hurry up and go through it. Even Subway that's supposed to be healthier for you doesn't have drive-through, you see?
I ate chips first.
Oh no, it's sandwich and apples first, remember?
Huh?
No. It is very difficult sometimes to figure out what to eat and what not to eat. Doctors don't give the practical advice just because they're not with you 24/7. Then I just like to research a little bit further. All the media is confusing. It's hard to know what's healthy. 1 minute it is good for you and the next minute it's not.
So how did the salon get its name?
When I was a baby, my dad used to call me Choppies.
Choppies.
He passed away, but I wanted something to remember him by. So I just decided to call the salon Choppies.
Oh, wow.
My father had diabetes for about 19 years.
Mi esposo tomaba medicina para el diabetes, pero luego se le enfermaba el riñón y después, si tomaba para el riñón, se descompuso el hígado. Sometimes he went to Tijuana to see doctors over there to see if they can help him. The last year he can walk. He was like a baby.
With diabetes, he got into depression and he never was able to get up again from that.
Mi hija tenía 3 meses de embarazo cuando lo encontramos muerto aquí en la casa.
With my first pregnancy, it turned out to be that I was diabetic. Gestational diabetes is what they call it. So I went into a panic mode just because my father had just passed away because of diabetes. I was taking insulin 3 times a day. But it was hard because I couldn't go out to eat. It made me understand how awful it was for my father. My father passing away was an awakening because I always saw diabetes as a disease, but I never saw it as it could kill somebody. Samuel was born on my dad's birthday. Samuel looks exactly like me and I look exactly like my dad, so I think, you know, he was God sent, my little miracle baby.
Hola. Buenas tardes. ¿Me das un cilantro?
So I do take care of myself much better than before. Samuel now, he's learning to eat vegetables. He'll eat my mom's caldo de pollo and caldo de res and the vegetables sometimes. It's a relief that my mom does do the cooking sometimes. And I just love that we get to come home to a home-cooked meal instead of going out to eat junk food. It's gonna take a while, but you know, together as a family, slowly but surely we'll get there.
All right, Dr. Carey, I think our second guest is here. And would you please, you can take over the mic.
Sure. Thank you. That was great. Thank you for pulling that up as well. I think it's just really interesting to see how they're doing so much outreach through the videos and the storytelling. And I think that that's so critical and often a skill that we don't have sometimes within the sciences and within academia, and to see how it does have impact is really interesting. So thank you. Yeah, so we're shifting to our next guest, Dr. Gaidi Faraj. Thank you so much for joining us and fitting us in your schedule. You're welcome to introduce yourself, or if you have slides, that's also great. Gaidi and I have been working together for probably about 5 years on and off on some different projects in East Africa and at UC Davis as well. So Gaidi, I'll let you get started.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Carrie. Thank you everybody for taking your time. I know we're all coming from different time zones. So good morning to all of you all. On the West Coast, good afternoon, wherever you are. So as Carrie mentioned, you know, she and I have been doing some work together for the past couple of years related to this space, related to the SDGs. So I'm gonna give a little bit of a background from myself and kind of where I approach this work. I'm currently in the history department at Grambling State University in Louisiana, but this is a new role. I've just recently transitioned back to the United States after spending 2 decades living and working in East Africa. I was in Tanzania for much of that time, and then switched over to Mauritius, and then the last 4 years in Rwanda. And I was in the private sector, but then also returned to higher education, and I was at a university called African Leadership University, and now I still engage with the continent doing consulting for higher ed universities on the continent. And while at, and so I kind of see my work as focused on thinking about how we reimagine education And there are a lot of ways in which that kind of ties into this conversation about food justice and health equity. How we look for Pan-African solutions, like really trying to bring that Pan-African conversation into this, because particularly as we live in this kind of global economy, food justice, food insecurity is not something that is isolated to particular markets. And I'll talk a little bit about that, and kind of where I think the role for those of us at more resource institutions or those of us in more research communities need to support other communities, particularly in Africa and South America right now. And then my third thing is, and related to that, is about facilitating access, right? So how do I use my position and my role to facilitate access, not just for people who are doing food justice work, but also when we think about the higher education space. So I worked at universities in Africa. Many of them, there is a resource gap, which leads to a preparation gap for students coming out of Africa. Much smaller percentage of students, finish primary school, therefore, enrolling in secondary, let alone finishing secondary, and then enrolling in college and university. And then once they finish their first degree, what are their options and opportunities for going to graduate school? And so I think there's some tie-ins there as well that hopefully we get a chance to talk about. The work that Carrie and I were doing was really around the SDGs and what we were referring to at my old university as the global challenges. And so we actually had a 4-year degree program on global challenges. And this aligns with where I'm talking about trying to think about how we reimagine education. So traditionally, higher ed has been very siloed, very focused on very specific narrow degrees, and is often quite removed from solutions that impact the community. And so we are trying to think about how in Africa do you create leaders of tomorrow that can center their learning journey around coming up with solutions to some of the greatest problems. So if we think about food insecurity, if we think about food justice, if we think about conservation and its relationship to agriculture and that whole movement that's kind of taking over the African continent right now, how can young people kind of fit themselves in and learn about political economy, learn about biology, learn about engineering, but learn about computer science, but focus any of those degrees or those majors around solving specific problems that are impacting their communities, whether it's in agriculture or food security or conservation, et cetera. So we tried to create a degree program that allowed students to kind of focus on something they were passionate about, something that was a problem impacting their community, and develop problem-solving skills that led them to implement kind of their learning and solutions. And so we were lucky enough to be able to get Carrie to come over to visit our campus in Mauritius, to visit our campus in Rwanda, and lead workshops with the students that were really focused on how do you think about coming up with creative new solutions to issues of food security, right? And it was we led a several-day workshop with those students where we kind of challenged them, laid out some frameworks for them, and then they would kind of come back and present to the class what solutions they'd come up with. And those solutions ranged all over the place. But what it did generate was a couple of those students getting very excited about the ideas that they'd come up with in this very short workshop and continuing to grow those. A couple of those students actually formed teams that went into pitch competitions. One of those teams actually won a pitch competition and actually started a company to implement the idea that they came up with in those workshops. And so that's what we're really trying to push for when we talk about reimagining education. How do we create learning experiences that drive students to coming up with solutions for problems in the community, but then actually trying to implement those solutions, right? So it's no longer just learning for learning's sake, but it's about how do they come up with practical solutions. One of the challenges that we encounter in trying to develop that new learning model is often the limited expertise that we have among faculty, senior researchers, et cetera, within those fields. And that's where we really need to kind of think about these bridges between the UC system in California, for example, other well-resourced institutions around the US or Europe that want to create pathways for students to enter graduate school, graduate programs. How do we create an understanding at more traditional universities of innovative programs like a Global Challenges program that will accept students coming out of those type of undergraduate programs into their STEM graduate programs, right? So understanding how a student who studied global challenges can then enter into an engineering program or a computer science program, et cetera. Because we need to create pathways for graduate studies if these students are really going to be able to take some of these solutions to the next level to really build sustainable solutions for their communities. So I still see part of my work as creating these pathways, creating these relationships between universities on the continent and universities in the US. Like I said, I recently joined Grambling, and I see a very close relationship and a lot of similarities and parallels between the work with universities on the continent and with HBCUs. If we think about HBCUs and Black communities in the United States, a significant number of professionals in the African-American community still come out of HBCUs, right? So the statistics are somewhere around 50% of all public school teachers got their degrees from HBCUs, something like 70% of all Black dentists in America. And so you can kind of go down the list in different professions, and a significant number from judges, lawyers, et cetera, even faculty at traditionally white research institutions, a significant percentage of them come out of HBCUs. The problem is not enough HBCUs actually have graduate programs, right? So a lot of them are colleges, but not universities. And even the ones who do have graduate programs are usually pretty kind of narrow fields, right? So they don't have the same breadth of opportunity that you have at PWIs and other major institutions. So how do we think about creating pathways for students who do their first degree at an HBCU into the UC system? For example, I graduated, I did my undergraduate degree at Morehouse College, and then I went and pursued my PhD at the University of California at Berkeley. And so how do we encourage more students to take that pathway where they're coming out of HBCUs and they don't just stop at the undergraduate degree, but they do see an opportunity for doing graduate school in the UC system, or the larger kind of university offerings in the US, PWIs, et cetera. And there's a very similar issue of creating pathways for students coming out of HBCUs as students coming out of Africa or other still developing markets where they don't have the same opportunities and resources to attend graduate school in their home communities. The other issue of concern that kind of hits home to me as we think about this relationship between UCs, and particularly as we're talking about kind of this idea of a center of expertise that is kind of a coalition of University of California system schools. What is the role that they can play as kind of a bulwark against kind of the spread of, I want to say, sponsored research and corporate research that we see? So a large problem in Africa right now is around land grabs and the spread of commercial agriculture, which is really focused on growing food for profit and not growing food for sustaining communities in those particular countries where that land is being taken. And a lot of the research that is justifying this, that is making arguments for large-scale agriculture, is really corporate sponsored research from the people who want to get access to that land. And much of it is focused on deliverables around economic output, around profit for the corporations that own the farms, and to a lesser degree around job creation. There's this whole push around large-scale agriculture creating jobs, even though large-scale farms employ less people per acre or hectare than small farms. So there's a lot of research that goes against the arguments for large-scale agriculture, but it doesn't get the same, doesn't have the same platform, doesn't get publicized the same way. And the reality is that researchers on the ground who are seeing the impact on local communities don't have access to research institutions, don't have access to publications, don't have access to research grants and money to do the work to push back against this kind of large-scale commercial push to create a narrative in Africa that, oh, the solution to your problems is to get away from small-scale farming, right? As if somehow that's what's holding back African communities when it comes to food security, when it comes to economic development. And so I'm really hoping that we can use institutions like the COE and other institutions as a way to amplify voices in some of these communities that are not able to, don't have access to the same resources in order to publish and push back against this corporate narrative that's going on. So that's generally kind of where I see my work right now.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think one of the valuable assets to a lot of the people that we have in this group is that they've had experience on different continents and can draw some of these parallels. So I think, you know, what you're saying from the work at ALU and the parallels with HBCUs, I can say that I also experienced that. I mean, visiting Tuskegee and looking at the resources and the infrastructure there, and seeing some parallels to things I was seeing in Kenya and in Rwanda as well. And then also within kind of our organization is that we do seem to have tentacles within the communities that we're trying to work with a bit, and their organizations that have access, but then still bridging that to the university and getting more students involved, I think is something that we're working towards. The Global Challenges Project and that idea of students really developing their college curriculum based on an idea and a solution that they're trying to get to. I think also, I know you weren't on the call before, but Dr. Lourdes spoke about these transdisciplinary teams where it's not just that a couple of people come together, but that it's actually like this explosive thing that happens. And so when you can get these different perspectives and get that passion behind it, then those students can approach the project and kind of learn those skills that they're going to have to know some economics, they're going to have to know some agriculture, they're going to have to know some social skills and understanding corporate markets and pressures. And so I think that's, I kind of wish I had gone to college in that manner, you know, versus like you're studying biology. And then it wasn't like, you know, you just kind of learn and see things in the news that grab your attention. But it wasn't till I was actually, you know, in West Africa with traditional healers and seeing food insecurity and medicine insecurity and health insecurity, and then saying, oh my God, like, how do I link my educational opportunities with the solutions that are already here? Because like where I was, there was no health clinic for miles. So they were just relying on the plants and the knowledge in that village to treat everything, basically. So yeah, I'll open it up. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments or questions?
Carrie, let me add to what you were just saying. Also, I think what the other important part about the transdisciplinary work is that we need more people in the UC systems, in the large research institutions, to be a little bit more humble with their work and recognize that people who are doing the community-based work or who are trying to come up with solutions need that expertise, need that advice, without people trying to pull them into their way of thinking about something, right? So if I go to somebody as a chemist and say, hey, can you advise me on this? Don't try and force me into your particular discipline or get me to think about something as you would in your traditional research field, but just advise me and support the project that I'm working on. Too often, we actually run up against experts who don't want to contribute because they feel like that's not their field. Right. And unless you're going to come over to, there's still this bias in fields, and we need people to kind of, we're never going to get the really transdisciplinary work if people aren't willing to kind of let go of some of that ego and that allegiance to their narrow discipline and field. And for some people, that's the only contribution they have to make. We're not asking everybody to completely change their field of work, but we're simply saying, hey, you're an expert, lend your expertise to these people who are doing a certain type of work without a bias against them because they're not in your field or your discipline. Right, but there is some piece of your expertise that is necessary to help their project grow and become sustainable or viable.
And I think when we're talking about community interventions, it's often also been like Dr. Lourdes also talked about, all the people who are running the community interventions are from that community. And 2 months ago, we had Makeda Dredd, who's down in San Diego at the World Beat Center. And she's working with Cornell on this noise project. And that was a big that was a big point, was that she's the co-PI. As a community lead, she has the same role as the PhDs with behavioral science degrees from Cornell. And so that's also, I think, kind of to add on to your point, is that it's also at the level, and then also who gets the money from the grants and the projects also has to be, like, you know, Dr. Lourdes also said, there has to be compensation. So I think oftentimes it's this idea where, like, okay, we see this community is suffering from food insecurity or cancer or this, and we're gonna go in with our expertise and go and drop this project off and then measure the outcomes and report back. And it really needs to be shifted completely from the lens of, like, the communities, like, we're seeing this, and so we need to kind of pull this expertise, but it still should always be from that like contextual lens. So it is really, it's interesting. James, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think that one of the things that I see is happening around the world is, particularly here in this country, is we have to shift from yields per acre to nutrition per acre. And if we have more focus on nutrition, I think we'll achieve better health outcomes. And the fact that, particularly in Africa, is look at it as agribusiness opposed to maybe just growing commodity crops that really doesn't have that profit margin that the farmers could actually survive off of. And also the same thing is happening here. So and it just takes a lot more education. So I'm very grateful to hear the great work you're doing and continue to do to shine the light on the absence of the idea of nutrition being the most important thing about farming. Per acre, per square foot, vertically, however you're going to achieve your growth, and concentrate more on specialty crops that on the diverse side, ethnic diversity crops, I should say, that may have a better profit margin for those farmers.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because the idea of nutrition per acre, or nutrition period, is one of the ones that gets lost in this kind of corporate push around agriculture and food and economic development. One of the examples I bring up with students in Africa all the time is KFC. So, you know, a decade ago, very few KFC branches in Africa at all. You really only found them in South Africa. The first branch opened there like in the 70s because, you know, the CEO of KFC had gone on safari in South Africa, right? So he got excited and opened a branch down there. But in the last decade, there has been this surge of KFC openings across Africa, and it becomes like this big event in each of the countries when they open. So when it opens in Dar es Salaam or Nairobi or Kigali, and they're opening multiple branches kind of right after each other, everybody gets excited. There's literally lines, you know, for blocks as everybody wants to go. And there's this real narrative around a new KFC equaling some sort of economic development, right? And it's access to, and this is how they promote themselves, it's access to higher quality food. That as you have a middle class growing, they want access to better quality. And what's better quality than American chain, right? And so there's this narrative around KFC equaling like good food, and people have really kind of made it because they can go to KFC and they have access now. And so this idea of nutrition is really getting lost in an argument, because KFC obviously would never kind of promote themselves as like the haven of nutrition, but they do promote themselves as quality food and as economic development. And that's a real problem, because it is probably the fastest growing food brand, or one of the fastest growing food brands across the continent. Of course, you know, the parent company Yum whatever also owns Pizza Hut, so now you're seeing Pizza Huts pop up as well. So you've got KFC and Pizza Hut springing up in pretty much every country on the continent, as if that is somehow a mark of progress when it comes to food access and food security, et cetera. Right now you've got kind of middle income countries, and that's a marker of success for middle income. And so I think that's a really important point, that we need to do more around education around the value of nutrition, not just in yields, but in terms of consumption, right? And not just, you know, corporate profit, you know, what sells.
Yes. Thank you.
And I mean, it's like that. It's almost like it's like a sense of liberation, you know. And then it's also hard to come in as a foreigner and be like, you know, like, oh, you shouldn't be eating meat and you shouldn't want to eat KFC. It's not good for you. But if I was in Nairobi as a kid, and of course I would want to run there too, right? Like it is something, it's flashy, but that's why it's like we're the suckers for that industry, right? The same in the US. Like it's not cool to be eating that stuff, and it's but yet among the youth, I definitely experienced that in Nairobi. And some of the studies that have been published are it doesn't take very long between where, like with the Maasai, they've studied where they lived in their rural villages, moved to Nairobi, and within a couple years, you already see the onset of diabetes and obesity because that rapid change to urban agriculture and the sense that you're somehow better off now that you can eat it. I know in Nairobi, there is one traditional restaurant where you can get ugali, which is the corn flour base kind of most meals. You can get it made out of millet. So it's this very purple. And even when you go in there, it's the oldest people who are in there that eat that. And the other, and you can see the color change even in the ugali now is if you go to most restaurants, it's white, it's bleached, and it's fortified corn flour. So you've got this whole extreme. And so even within the restaurants there's very few, even within the traditional Kenyan food, or you look at the greens that they serve, there's probably 8 different kinds of indigenous African leafy vegetables, but most of the restaurants will just have the collard greens now. They don't have the other bitters and the amaranth and the spider plant leaves and all these other ones. So those are getting lost, and they are actually even more nutritious than the collards. So again, it's like every step away is more and more dangerous. So it's really interesting to see rapid things happen. And I think the other thing from Africa that's interesting is there's the opportunity to skip over innovations and things that didn't work out. Like, you know, I think we've talked about like there's not going to be telephone poles in Africa because everyone has cell phones. So you skip over those innovations that don't have good impact. And so I'm hoping that, you know, we can kind of save some of that indigenous nutrition that's on the continent and not have it all wiped out by KFC and, you know, keep these smallholder farms.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's also kind of goes back to the point about why it's so important to create pathways for graduate study for people coming out of these communities, right? Because you're not going to have people who already have some experience and say, hey, well, we actually know that doesn't work because we saw this other group come in 5 years ago or 10 years ago and they failed in their effort. But what you have is coming from the West, there's always this, oh, I've got this great idea. I'm going to go and implement this in somebody else's community because they don't know what's best. And those people also often don't have the context of why that's not going to work in that particular community. So how do we create pathways for people coming out of these local communities to get access to higher education and then get access to graduate programs, graduate study, so they can actually do the research on some of the crop diversity that we're talking about here. So they can come back and really promote within their communities why they should continue to eat some of their traditional foods, right? And not migrate over to a KFC or a Doritos diet, right? Because you do see this where you have people are jumping from one extreme of malnutrition to the other extreme of malnutrition, right? Where they are, you know, under eating and stunting, and then they get middle class status and it's obesity and heart disease and diabetes. But we lack local expertise, which also means we lack local advocates for a certain type of diet and for certain food stuff. So we really need to figure out how to create these pathways for students coming out of the African universities or even African high schools, secondary schools to get access to graduate programs in the US.
And I think also it's almost like, could there be some credentialing program, right? So if you've been a community leader for 10 years, you get some degree, like as if you were in academia, or like that's not, you know, each person is doing their own projects, and it is harder at a glance to know their level of experience than it is from an academic perspective, I would say, right? Like I have a PhD, so you know I went to school for X amount of time or something. But when you meet people who are in the community doing the work, you do have to get to know their projects and all of this. And
Right.
the other point to that is that they often don't have time to go to the graduate programs, to go to the meetings, to go to the grant writing sessions. And we talked about this too, like with CDFA, they're not giving out a lot of grants to minorities. A lot of minorities are not applying, and a lot of those people are just doing the work in their organizations, on their farms. And that's where it's like, you know, how do you bring people like that together? So,
right. And that's where we have to get back to the conversation about how do we reimagine what education looks like? Because if you say somebody is out doing the work, they're in the community, they're on the farm, et cetera, and they've got years of experience, but we're telling them in order for them to prove their expertise, they have to stop what they're doing and come sit in the classroom for 2 years before they can begin to do research, right? And how is that model still applicable and relevant, as opposed to saying, well, actually, we're going to create new pathways where you can have project-based work, where you can, you know, translate the work that you're already doing into something that makes sense, that we can kind of then quantify and validate and give you your degree or your certificate, you know, the certification process you're talking about. Like, there has to be other ways in which we imagine validating people's work without saying that they have to stop that work and come and go through your old rites of passage. Right? So there needs to be a serious reimagining of what that looks like at the undergraduate level and at the graduate level.
Definitely. It is interesting, and kind of, you know, I'd like to know and learn more too about kind of within just the state of California, just because it's such a large, it's like its own country kind of. We have this UC system, we have the state system, and we have community colleges. And it would be also interesting to see at each of those levels, what is the level of minority representation and community engagement? Because from my understanding, even if you look at like cooperative extension, there is more community representation and diversity within UC A&R that is working with the community than at the UC system. And I believe it's same with the state and community colleges as well. You know, so it's interesting to see how those level up and then where the funding is too, right? So there's got to be a bit of redistribution, I think.
Yeah, but you're not going to have redistribution without having, you know, the reality is, and it's some people on this call, you know, we need to let go of our ego, right? You got, you know, certain type of work that's happening in, you know, community colleges, and there's, you know, I know California specifically, for example, has a push to allow community colleges to offer 4-year degrees. The reason for the push is just about access and affordability, right? But there is pushback to that movement by the UC and the CSU system, right? And so it's like, you know, we can't talk about wanting redistribution, but then also trying to protect our silo, right? So at a certain point, we're gonna have to say, we're gonna have to restructure these systems and give up some of our, you know, perceived power and authority to allow other people access to these spaces.
Yeah, it was interesting. My son is in 7th grade, and he said they had a college recruiter come and speak, and he said, you know, based on the talk, I want to go to community college. And I said, well, that's interesting. Who was the speaker, and, you know, what did they tell you about? And he said, well, I looked at the different lines, and then he described the community college experience. He said, well, you can work while you go, you can train in fields that you're interested in and take classes in those fields. And I was like, that sounds great, right? I mean, shouldn't all education kind of be like that? And then that's the community level. That's not really offered at UC, you know. That sounds more like not quite a global challenge, but at least like a personal challenge project, right? Where you're like, I'm basing my educational experience on the career that I'm trying to engage in, at least at this stage in my life. Versus taking classes completely separately and without that engagement, you know. And so, I mean, definitely my experience spending 2 weeks in Cuba throughout my undergraduate 4 years was probably more impactful than, you know, a lot of classes. Like to see communities work in health and in food, in a place that was very food insecure, and how they operated, and it was, you know, really interesting. So, James, do you have another question, or I wasn't sure if your hand's still up. Does anyone else have any other comments or thoughts?
No, I didn't have another question. I just enjoyed the dialogue. It was tremendous. There's a lot of gaps out there. So
Yeah, we Gaidi and I do have a current grant with UC Global Affairs, and so that is to have, this is kind of a little idea, again, a little project, but it's basically to kind of adapt the entrepreneurship workshop that was developed at the business school with the Global Challenges program at ALU and the faculty there, to kind of shape it and shift it to say, can you develop business plans around the SDGs through an African lens, basically? So we're trying to kind of, again, bring those two things together and have students at ALU and hopefully UC Davis take those classes. So we're always navigating, you know, COVID changes and budgetary changes, but there's nothing better than kind of engaging with students and people from all over. So it's been nice and exciting to have other people kind of in this space as well.
Yeah, Carrie, I wanted to say, you know, I'm glad you brought that one up. The issue of entrepreneurship, right? And where entrepreneurship ties into this whole issue around food justice and food insecurity is another space where I think it's important for the UC system, other resource institutions to intervene as a lot of the UC system, you know, not just UC, excuse me, research institutions are in some ways beholden to corporate dollars. We understand that kind of relationship, but they still have a lot more autonomy than direct sponsored research or than underfunded institutions. And there is such a push around the narrative of entrepreneurship now that it is very difficult for somebody to pursue research in areas where they cannot show a viable product as the basis for their work, right? And so it leads into this whole argument around corporate agriculture, you know, in the land grabs in Africa, but, you know, we're seeing the same thing as small farmers are being, you know, wiped out in the US as well, and the push against kind of community farms. So how do we create spaces for these large resourced institutions to support research that is not driven by creating a profitable or sustainable project or business, right? There has to be space for entrepreneurial thinking where people are thinking about solving problems in the community without having to figure out how to monetize it, right? If all of our research is about figuring out how to wind up with a monetized project, it's going to really narrow and kind of restrict the work that's being done, particularly in some of these communities where people are already immersed in work that has nothing to do with creating a profitable company. But there's such a push around the narrative of entrepreneurship that it leaves those people behind. It's like they have no access to grants or research funding or research support because they're not pursuing what's hot and sexy in the field right now. And so we need to kind of get the big R1s and other institutions that have the research to create kind of a buffer and create spaces for those people to be able to come in and do research that has no intention of ever leading to being somebody's company.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, I think that UC Davis has about a $1 billion budget for research, $1 billion, you know, I mean, that's a lot. And a lot of that is from my last meeting with the chair from the Office of Research. They had just been in DC and they said most of the investment was going into AI, into defense, into technology, into IT. And I said, you know, but we're the biggest agricultural, you know, land grant institution in California. Like, are the SDGs on, you know, are they of concern you know, at the DC level, at the federal level of research, at NSF and NIH? Is climate change on there? Is it a concern? And he said no. It's more of like a European kind of concept. And to me, it's even interesting how many people know about the UN SDGs. I mean, they are so inspiring and so comprehensive. I mean, there is criticism about them too, but it is at least a place to start when you start to look at these issues. And so I think, even at UC Davis, when I took the business classes, I expected more of this kind of social entrepreneurship, or, we talked about that most companies operate on a profit margin, right? That's their bottom line. And so you can think of developing businesses that have a triple bottom line that meet social, environmental, and economic benefits. And to me, it's like, if you're not designing graduates programs or business models that don't have those things in mind, it's outdated at this stage, right? So I mean, even like the green revolution in Africa and stuff, it was like, oh, just apply the fertilizers and this is but the yields never increased. And then the GMO argument is also really interesting in Africa, where it hasn't been allowed in. But even with GMOs, it's just expecting more fertilizer too, and there's more dependence. My last visit to Kenya, I was leaving this village, and the coworker I was with said, this guy bought corn last year and it did so well, so he planted it again, but they didn't tell him at the shop that it was GMO corn. So this year he's got nothing. So he had these huge stocks, and because there was no knowledge transfer that the GMO corn wasn't going to grow the next year, that he was dependent on buying seeds every year, he had no food for his family. And that was one farm that I saw. And that shouldn't be happening. That's bad if the intervention and the technology is setting people back and misleading them in other directions, So there is a lot of push and pull of like you said, this egos, and the knowledge within this concept is something that I think we need to work on as well, so. There's some Edie put in some interesting comments in the chat about her experience at UC Davis as well, I think, that I found to be interesting. I just wanted to share before she left, if I can find it. She said, in my limited experience, the UC system has a level of hierarchy that operates at the expense of democratizing knowledge and promoting equity. And I think she was talking about the CSU and community colleges, having more access to the community and stuff. So it is interesting, kind of where you choose to operate in this space, right? That's the other thing, I guess, even at my own personal level, right? Like, I'm with the UC system, and where will I have the most impact? If I start my own NGO, if I start my own company, if I stay within the UC system, if I go to a state school, these are different decisions too that I think we're all making. And I think it's interesting to play a role in a lot of those different spaces. And I think I mentioned to you yesterday, Gaidi, that, and also Cheryl's aware that the city of Sacramento is creating a food justice task force as well. So they're investing about $2 million over the next couple of years in food justice, but they're just starting plans and just getting organizations together and having conversations. So a lot of these issues that we're talking about are I can see them shaping and playing out in that space. So anyone on this call who's also interested or in the area in Sacramento, or has advice, where other cities have taken on these types of projects to see how it works, I think Dr. Laudrus's presentation is also like really useful for that. And it seemed like they did a lot of like critical work even during COVID. So yeah, that the community level stuff, and I think I mentioned to you yesterday too, that a lot of this stems back from, what the Black Panther Party was doing, and how you can see when people are locked out of these systems, how they will create their own networks that operate to address these issues.
Yeah. you know, it's interesting, you know, you mentioned that the research budget for Davis and comments on the budget. I think people also forget sometimes the relative scale of these budgets, right? So UC Davis having $1 billion research budget is not that much different from some other tier 1 or R1, you know, institutions in the US, but, you know, it's also equal to the operating budgets of many small countries around the world, right? And if you look at the overall operating budget of the UC system, it is significantly higher than the operating budgets of most countries on the African continent, right? On a year-to-year basis. And so there is so much that can be done if we can figure out pathways for just a little bit of access to some of these resources, right? And get people to stop owning their silos, or, you know, like you mentioned, you know, in our previous conversation, there are so many institutes and institutions within the UC system that are doing the same type of work, right? But everybody's got to have their own name on something for, you know, a tenure package or whatever else they're working on, or for them to get their grants and kind of acknowledgement for their particular department, as opposed to advancing the type of work that's going forward, right? And so that's what we were trying to do around, you know, kind of reimagining a global challenges program, is like, stop focusing on people's individual programs or disciplines and focus more on the work and the solutions to the problems. And so how do we figure out how to at least create access for researchers and community workers coming from more disadvantaged communities to get access to these billion-dollar budgets, to get access to these multi-billion-dollar operational budgets, and these teams that, you know, are, you know, getting millions of dollars to run projects around issues they know very little about, right? But they're getting funded because it's a hot topic, right? As opposed to people who've been doing work in particular communities year on year and have no access to even a fraction of those resources.
Yeah. Christian Brown, who's also usually on these calls, he's really active in the sickle cell community in Oakland, and he spoke about this and has been, I mean, all because his son has sickle cell, he's been in that community. And, you know, he's like this doctor, you know, at the Oakland Children's Hospital just got an $18 million grant, and it's all on genetic modification and, you know, these types of treatments. And he's like, we're not getting any funding. We have, you know, a network of people, newsletters. We're talking about food and health, and I'm getting feedback from people that changing their diets, the kids are having less symptoms, less severity. And he's so frustrated because there's this grant, like you said, of someone who, I mean, maybe has the scientific knowledge on sickle cell, but not any concept of what it's like to be in a community, to have, you know, I mean, these, and I would say the same thing with our work with like malnutrition, you know, I mean, how many people who are working in malnutrition have even gone a day without food? You know, I mean, it's like that even concept is, I mean, when I was in Rwanda on another project, there was a doctor who literally said that, like, if you want to do this work, just try not eating for a couple days and see how you feel. Because if you're trying, you know, and a lot of these things, we don't have the homelessness, unless you're dealing with people who are homeless and they're operating in that system, there's no way you can just step into that with a solution. It's just, again, but so how do you provide those platforms and access? And it, like you said, it doesn't take much because the gap is so extreme. And I think you're right. It's hard to conceptualize sometimes how different that is, you know, and I mean, it took me 7 years to publish this paper on moringa production in Kenya from a local owned cooperative and an export company. And at the end of it, the export company was paying the workers, the contracted workers, about 35 cents a day. And I mean, and it took 7 years. So my salary over 7 years to finally publish and make a point that this social benefit company was not, you know, was really adding to and exacerbating the state of poverty within those contracted farmers and not supplying this healthy, nutritious food and lifting up livelihoods in Africa as they were advertising, you know, but I'm still, 35 cents a day is still something to think about. You know, I think like it's still, people are blown away by the comparisons of income, you know, and what's frustrating is that the intelligence and the innovation and the creativity is all there. And so when you see that and you meet people who could do amazing things but don't have the financial resources or access, it is frustrating.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you're hitting at, you know, one of the challenges, but it's something, you know, hopefully, you know, everybody on this call, and they can kind of go back and talk to one person. One of the things we really need people to do is, you know, the opening of access, the sharing of resources really kind of starts with folks saying, I'm going to create access myself. What do I have access to? What centers, what budgets, whatever, et cetera. And then reaching out to community projects in your local community, in your research area, you know, internationally. I'm always trying to connect people to schools and projects in Africa where people can, you know, even sometimes just putting your name to a project will help other people get access to resources, helping people, you know, mentoring folks so they can understand, you know, how to write proposals, where to look for proposals, how to get their research published. There's so much people can do that is a relatively light lift for people who are coming from institutions that have some resources, if they would just reach out and establish a partnership, or, you know, give a few hours to some of these different projects. But, you know, I assume a lot of people on this call already have that level of consciousness. So again, it's also about, you know, talking to that one person. Can you recruit one other person to kind of come on board and do a similar type of work, to volunteer some hours, to establish a partnership, to reach out to a community organization somewhere and help get them access to resources that they deserve, that would benefit their work, but that they might not even know are available, right? And so how do we get more people out there and engaged in this type of work?
Definitely, because there are resources out there, you know, it's just, and sometimes just like you said, fine tuning, or these little kind of platforms, you know. I always think of, like, you know how you can link your hands and use that as like a step for somebody to step up. And sometimes it's really just that simple, is just a little bit of like, oh, I can see a little higher, a more vision. And there are a lot of international programs and stuff like that. So we'll continue to kind of work and share those for resources. And I'll also just say that we're applying to use this Food Justice Center also as a first-year seminar at UC Davis. And so I'm hoping that we can develop that for a credit course, but that it would be open to everyone. And so even students from ALU or Grambling University or these other places could come in, and we hope to feature, you know, guest speakers like you, and then also have the students develop their own food justice projects, or highlight other people that they find out in the community that are doing this work. Because sometimes that's what you need, right? I mean, it could be that maybe you're not the one with this amazing urban farm, but you know someone who is, and you're really good at social media and videos, so you can go and showcase their work and connect them with other people. And I think that that's also a field where, you know, the younger generation will be interested in as well. So well, does anyone else have any other thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I have one, Carrie, just in terms of, you know, one of the things we don't never talk about is aquaculture, and the lack of, we don't have a fish policy in this country. So for those that are seeking plant-based diet, protein-based diets, you can get both right there, right? But for some reason, and I do feel hopeful that times are changing because of climate change, that we can force more of these type systems into the cities. One project I'm working on is a Urban Ag Academy in Charlotte, North Carolina, that will bring the community together. We'll teach agripreneurship. We also need to collaborate with the hospitals, the health departments, like Edie's model, gardens and clinical spaces, and just have everything right there on the farm. We can promote agritourism, we can promote agripreneurship, and get more people excited about growing their own food for profit, as well as creating these palatable meals, crops that are very nutritious, as well as to bring the community together. So I'm hopeful that things are changing, but as I said, we don't even have a fish policy. And that is a big problem in this country, particularly with the way that the markets are trending right now. But I do feel hopeful, and I'm thinking that this academy hopefully will create the type of impact that we need to have in these cities, because if the city doesn't have a urban ag ordinance like they do in SAC or some other cities, that would allow young people, the next generation, to grow food for profit in a smaller space. For instance, in a hoop house, grow vertically, aquaponically, hydroponically, and their customer base is within 20-mile radius. So we got rid of the tractor, the transportation, and all of that, and we have developed an app that connects the growers with the buyers. And I think if we can achieve a little bit more of that this year, we'll go a long way towards solving some of these problems we have in the cities and growing food in smaller spaces.
So are you going to be able to share this curriculum and stuff? Can we put it in for other grants? Because that is kind of what I think we'd like to do, or have a piece of that. Like I mentioned, kind of having the intervention being some community-based training, and then outcomes being like food security and health outcomes. But I'd love to, really have something. I know Rafael in Brazil has also been doing some trainings with the community. So it'd be great to have somewhat of a template that could be, also tweaked and adapted depending on the location and the community and the culture and everything. But I think some of the principles would be the same. So it'd be great if you're willing.
Oh yeah, I'll share. I'm just about finished. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to edit now. So probably by Thursday, I'll be finished with it. And then I'm gonna make a trip down to do some on-site observation so that we can put this in place by the summer of 23. That's the goal. But it will be a 16-week class, on-site and virtual. And then we're going to do a basic 5-week class, right? Just to give you an idea of what it takes to become an urban farmer, business planning, marketing, distribution, all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I am pretty excited about it. And I'm really happy that I was able to sign in today to listen to some of the fantastic work the professors are doing, and yourself and others. So this has been very, very helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, Gaidi and I were speaking about, or I was saying, it's with the cannabis industry, it's so explosive and there's so much money involved. But I said, when it was legalized, people can grow 6 personal plants themselves for their own medical use, recreational use. And yet I don't know what percentage of people are, and are there training programs on that? And in these urban settings, if people are using that for their wellness, why can't they grow it themselves when it's one of the most expensive commodities now and highly taxed and highly regulated? So outside of having a business opportunity, which I also support, it's like, again, this personal home consumption idea that provides sovereignty and opportunity for you to grow what you want. But I think a lot of people don't have the skills or know-how either. So maybe your training can also be implemented. We can try and do more of that in California as well.